I'm recording today's session. I've had a couple of requests for people who couldn't make it at this particular time to have a recording. So I am recording today, just so that you know. And that recording is likely to end up as part of the Transana video archives at some point online. Okay, so we're talking about Transana 5.0, the new release that came out last week. And it has really four main features that I'm going to talk about. And I hope that you will find them as interesting and helpful as I do. As is not uncommon with Transana, I just got the release out, and already a couple of these features are absolutely essential to the work that I do every day. So we're going to start with the topic of automated transcription. People have been asking me for 20 years, will Transana produce my transcript for me? And I have always said that there was not a way of doing that that took less time than transcribing manually. We finally turned that corner with the advance of speech-to-text technology that's finally gotten to the point where I can actually submit a file to a speech-to-text engine and be able to come up with a workable transcript in less time than it takes me to create that transcript from scratch. And so I'm just going to demonstrate that on a couple of quick files. So we'll start with Bill Swan. This is a television commercial from, I don't know, 20 some odd years ago. Got really, really good audio quality. So I'm going to go ahead and do an automated transcript of that. So I'm going to start by creating a transcript, and we'll call this automated transcription. And you'll notice that there is this automated transcription method box here, and there's only one method in it at the moment, Speechmatics server. Speechmatics is one of the text-to-speech companies out there. There are a ton of them. But there were a number of things that I thought Speechmatics did particularly well. I think the quality of their transcripts is very good. They support 48 different languages, which I think is fantastic. And since Transana has a global audience, that's important. They also have a feature that I particularly like, where they provide the amount of confidence that their speech engine has in each of the words that they have transcribed, so that you can actually create an indication in the transcript of how confident the program was in recognizing that speech. I have found that, like posts on the internet, the correlation between confidence and correctness is not always as high as one might like, but it at least gives you an indication of where to start when you're looking at a transcript. So I've selected, and I will be adding more automated transcription methods over the next couple of years as more become available, and as I sort through which ones I can support and choose to support. But I've started with the Speechmatics server version. So I'm requesting that as my automated transcription method. That means it's going to go out. And so I'm now in the automated transcription tool, and this first page really is the sort of the reminder to people that your data is going to be going out to a server that you don't have control, and so you need to make sure that you've got it approved by your IRB, that you can use this service, that there is a potential issue with confidentiality. Now, Speechmatics, of course, has all of their legalese on their website about how they manage your data and don't ever look at it and keep it confidential and all that fun stuff. I'm not taking any responsibility for that. That's up for you and your IRB to decide. But this page just reminds people to be sensitive to the issue of confidentiality. The next page goes out to the media file and extracts the audio from video. There's no reason to submit a video file to a service like Speechmatics. They're only looking at the audio anyway. And so audio files are smaller, and it reduces the identifiability of participants because you're just getting a voice you're not also getting a picture of them. That's an abstract consideration because nobody's looking at the data anyway. But we just submit audio, and so Transana extracts the audio from the video file, and it just submits that audio to the server. We then have a page where we specify what language do we want. You notice there is a long list of languages here. So what language is the video in? I had somebody ask the other day about mixed languages, if they have people speaking multiple languages, and I'm not quite sure how the voice recognition tool will deal with that. I have not been able to get an answer from them yet on that topic, but you can identify the primary language spoken in the media file. For English and for Chinese, you actually get some additional information. So for English, you can specify if it's Australian English, British English, or US English. There are a number of variations of Chinese as well that are supported. Unfortunately, the server that we use is blocked in China, as I understand, so it's not going to work as well in China as one might hope. And then you have to have an account with Speechmatics, and they give you something called an API key, which is basically a username and password that you can put into Transana, and that is what authorizes your connection to them, and they handle all of the billing for their service. Transana is just a pass through. You need a relationship with them. They offer, I think it's 4 hours of media a month for free, and then have rates beyond that. But you can get all of that information from the Speechmatics website. And so you put in your API key that you get when you sign up to identify your account with them. And so I'm now going to hit next. And so Transana is sending the file to their server and getting back the transcript that is associated with it. Now, this is a 30-second long commercial, so it takes almost no time to do all of that. And when I hit finish here, I get my transcript created by them. And now, as I mentioned earlier, they provide information about the confidence that they have. And so when Transana imports that transcript, I color code all of that. And so you'll see that if it's not 90% or higher confidence, I just print it as black. If it's 80 to 90%, I print it as blue. Green is 70 to 80%. So here's an instance of green, and then 70% or lower is in red. And so we can see first off that it's all time coded. It's handled all of the time coding automatically, so you don't have to time code yourself, which saves a full pass through your media file. And so let's go ahead and look at this transcript.
The moment that made me switch from a PC to a Mac.
That was pretty good. That looked to match to me.
She needs to print it. Every time she tries to print, the computer crashes. The computer and the printer, they...
Okay, so this one that was in green, they had crash, and it was actually crashes. So you can go into edit mode, you can make your correction, and you can select the word. And I've added a new button to the transcript toolbar that is specifically designed to turn to make anything that is color coded to turn it into black text. And so I can turn it black to indicate that I've corrected that one. Here it's the individual's name. I happen to know that that's correct. Let's look at this one.
Opening up the PC, digging through it, replacing cards.
So there was a little bit of a stutter there, and so that was what led to the uncertainty on the part of the automated transcription program. And again, they got that correct, so I can correct that. And so that's the first video. Now, that's really good quality audio, so it's not entirely a fair test, but that gives you at least a sense of what the process is like. So we'll go to a piece that I use quite frequently, is a piece from the BBC that has 2 speakers, and I've used this for a long time to test various forms of automated transcription. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to add a transcript here. And again, we'll choose the Speechmatics method. And so, yes, I understand that I shouldn't send confidential data without the approval of the IRB. And then it takes a second to extract the audio. And I have the same credentials. I should have changed it to British English because this is a BBC piece. Was going a little too fast there. This piece is a little longer, takes a little bit longer to get the transcript back. And when we pull that up, we see that, again, there's a little bit more in the way of words tagged as uncertain. But again, we can look at this. Let's pick a paragraph.
OECD, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development think tank, says that the UK's not only in a severe recession, but it's revising down its growth forecast, and says that, you know, while the rest of the world is seeing the end is in sight for the recession, the UK's not performing quite so well.
And so that was all correct. I can go in edit mode and turn that to black.
Arguably, you know, the FSA has watched the practices of the banks it supervised for many years, where this sort of structure is absolutely the norm, and you know, accepts the idea that this is the way to incentivize people.
And so you can see that it's really doing a very good job capturing that that audio. But again, that is a professionally produced piece with really good audio. Let's go ahead and take a sample of classroom video where the audio quality is not so good, it's not so produced. And we'll go ahead and add a transcript here to our third example. But it really is as simple as you select the automated transcription method when you're creating a transcript, and that will trigger this process. So it's integrated, it's very, very easy to use. It handles the time codes automatically. And works very smoothly. Thank you, Zainab, for putting the link to Speechmatics into the chat for everyone.
Of course.
And, you know, the longer your video, the longer it takes to do the processing, which of course makes sense. And so here we see that, again, there's more uncertainty reflected in the color coding within the transcript. And so let's go down to about here.
What happens each time?
It goes to the same
Lifting
thing.
it up or lifting? Oh, do you think we have to test it on their courseware?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, now are they the same?
So I notice a couple of things as I look at this. First off, it's not handling overlapping speech well, which I was not a bit surprised by. Overlapping speech is can be challenging for human transcribers, and I don't really expect the computer to be able to get it. We notice here's a word that it has high confidence in that is in fact incorrect. What she was talking about there was a core square, not four square, which is okay. And so you can see that, again, we get a good starting transcript. My feeling about automated transcript at this stage, the technology can produce a good first draft, a good rough transcript, but you still need to take the time to go through it, listen to the video, make corrections. It's not going to be where you can request an automated transcript and jump immediately to analysis. The technology simply isn't good enough to do that yet. But it is finally to the point where it takes me less time to correct their transcript than it would take to create a new one from scratch using Transana's tools for assisting the transcription process. So that's the automated transcription tool. Does anybody have any questions about that? Anything you'd like me to talk about or show?
I have a quick question, David.
Sure.
Just do you know if Speechmatics does take locutors into consideration by putting like do they have any options there that we can use to put locutors who's speaking?
No, it does not have that option.
Okay.
I've seen one program I tested along the way did try and do that, but in the sample video that I submitted, it just called everybody unidentified speaker, so I didn't find it that helpful. So I know that that is something that some people are working on. Speechmatics does not offer that that feature at this point. But the way that Transana presents things, it just does it on a sentence by sentence basis. You can see that it just makes every sentence a separate line. And again, the software is not perfect at identifying sentences because human speech doesn't work like written speech in a lot of cases, and there's a lot of ambiguity in sentences.
Bye.
But with Transana presenting it just a sentence on each line, it's relatively easy to go in and put in speaker identifiers and to group the sentences together into blocks for each speaker's turn, or however it is you want to have them organized. But no, that's not something that's done automatically at this time.
I also used another one, but it wasn't accurate. Like they were putting like different locutors. So thank you so much.
All right, so that is the topic of automated transcription. A second addition to Transana 5.0 is the ability to bring in PDF data. PDF is an interesting format from a technology standpoint in that it combines the features of text documents where there's certain information in terms of text that needs to get communicated, but it combines that with an emphasis on graphics and layout and positioning, so that if you actually look at the contents of a PDF file, there's no concept of order in a PDF document. Every portion of the data has a location and it has a description of what belongs in that location, but it's stored in the document in the order that it was originally entered when they were creating the PDF, which may or may not correspond to the order that one would want to go through the document as a human. And so that presents certain challenges when working with PDFs. And so I had to create a whole different way of working with PDFs than to just treat them as text documents that had graphics incorporated. So I'm going to go ahead and add a PDF. I've right-clicked my library, and you see that in what used to read add document now says add text or PDF document, to emphasize that whether you've got a word processing file, a Word doc, or a PDF file, you start in the same place. And I'm now going to browse out here, and I'm going to select a PDF as my source. And I'm going to hit OK. And Transana now has imported my PDF. And you can see it's showing me the full page. It's a mixture of graphics and text. It's more formatted than a standard text document traditionally is. But Transana now has the capacity of importing that. Transana can handle multi-page PDFs as well, although it only displays one page at a time. You can see up in the toolbar, there is a section that allows you to jump through pages in a multi-page PDF. And so Transana can handle multi-page PDFs without any sort of a problem. And so the next issue that we go into is, now that we've brought the data into Transana, how do we code it? And so as I was thinking about what are people going to want to do with PDFs, I realized that there were really two different things that people were going to want to do. On the one hand, there were going to be times when you wanted to work specifically with the text, that you wanted to treat this as a piece of text. You want to be able to have the text be accessible to Transana. So for example, if I go to my word frequency report on this PDF, we see that I'm able to create a word cloud from this document, that Transana is able to read what is presented as text and treat that as text for all of its processing. If I did a text search on some of these phrases, this document would be returned as something containing that text. So Transana treats what is text as text and is able to recognize that. And so we can make text selections from that. So for example, let's say I want to take this block that is the instructions, and I want to create a quote of that piece of text. I can choose to code text in my image, and then the model with PDFs is one of using the shape of the window to select what you're interested in. So because you don't always want the whole context of the whole page showing up when you're interested in a particular section, you have the capacity to zoom in and to rearrange and to select visually what you want. I'm going to pull this back just a little bit to give it a little context. And then I am going to draw what's called a text rectangle. So this is indicating what is the portion of this document I want to code. So I've selected this block of text as being the text that I want to process in creating the clip. I then go down to a collection and I can choose add a PDF quote. If I wanted to, I could select a keyword and do a PDF quick quote. I'm just going to do a regular quote in this instance. And so we'll give this the name of instructions. You can see that Transana has pulled in the text that I had selected. It also pulls in a little bit of extra stuff, a bunch of blank lines in this case. The way PDFs are constructed, they tend to have some junk in them sometimes. So you can't always quite count on getting exactly the text that you want. So it's a good idea to edit the text that shows up here, because all of those blank lines affect how this would be presented in the reports and other things like that. So I've cleaned up the text slightly. Sometimes you get some odd characters, sometimes you get some odd formatting issues. And that's just because Transana is pulling the data from the PDF and doesn't know how to interpret some of the stuff that ends up in a PDF file because of the way PDFs are constructed. And so I now hit OK. I now have this PDF quote. And so I'm going to close my PDF. If I open that PDF quote, it shows you exactly how I had the thing, the screen framed when I made my selection. It shows the exact selection. If I look at the word frequency report, we can actually see that these words reflect what is in those instructions. So it is pulling the text and processing the text like that. I can hit the load context button to go back to my full PDF. And you can see now that when I look at the PDF as a whole, that coding shape of my text rectangle shows up. I can use the key to know that that is a text selection from this. And so working with the PDF as text is one of the ways that people are going to want to work with that data. And in Transana, you do that through creating text selections or text quotes using the text rectangle. But I also know that people are going to want to look at some of the visual aspects of this. They're going to want to select bits that are not text, that are graphical in nature. For example, in this case, we have the two sponsor logos down at the bottom, and maybe somebody is interested in looking at those sponsor logos. So there is another option where you can actually make graphical selections and treat the PDF as graphic rather than text in working with it. So I'm going to, instead of making saying I want to code text, I'm going to say I want to code image. So Transana is now going to treat this PDF as an image rather than as text. I'm again going to select the particular bit that I am most interested in. And this selection process is actually more important when you're creating, when you're working with PDFs as images, because Transana creates a graphic for your selection, it creates an image file for your selection based on the framing, and it doesn't make sense to bring in the whole page of the PDF around a particular selection when you're interested in that. So I'm now going to I didn't create a code for this. I'm just going to draw a rectangle. We can assume that there's a meaningful code behind this, and I can draw the coding shape on and code that rectangle. Let's say I want to do an ellipse, and no, I don't want it to be red. I want it to be purple, and I can draw that ellipse. And so I've now applied 2 codes to this particular image, not particularly meaningful codes because I forgot to create the keywords up front, but this at least gives you the idea. And I can now go down to my collection and I can choose to add a PDF snapshot. So a PDF quote is a textual selection. A PDF snapshot is a graphical selection, both from a PDF serving slightly different analytic purposes. I'm going to create my PDF snapshot. I can do whole image coding as well, but since I have the coding in my coding shapes on this, I don't need to do that. And so I have now created a second selection that is a graphical selection. If I open my PDF snapshot, you see that it opens the window with the framing that I had at the time. It shows me the coding that I had at the time that I saved it, and it pulls it all up that way. But those 2 kinds of selections are actually treated very differently under the hood in Transana, and that becomes really clear when we look at the collection report. So for my first selection, my PDF quote, we see that what I get in the data is actual text, that this is editable, it's searchable, it's available to the word frequency report. It is, because I selected a text selection, it got converted to text and it's treated as text internally. Whereas with my PDF snapshot, the second selection I made, that was graphically oriented, and what Transana shows me here is the graphic. It literally shows me the image of the selection and the framing that I had when I created that PDF snapshot. So that comes through in the report as a graphic image because I'm doing graphical coding with that portion of it. And so there are 2 different ways of making selections within PDFs to handle some of the sophistication of PDF as a format, to be able to capture both the textual elements when that's what's important and the graphical elements when that's what you're really looking at in your analysis. Is that sufficiently clear? Does that make sense to people?
No.
Any questions about working with PDFs? All right. Excellent. All right. The third feature that I wanted to talk about in terms of Transana 5.0 is there's a new way of coding images. So in Transana 4, when you're working with still images, you had coding shapes, and you could select rectangles, ellipses, lines, and arrows. And you could do some reasonable coding, some detailed coding to draw our analytic attention to different portions of an image. So we have, you know, in this particular statue, the thing that I noticed about it and that I wanted to call to the analyst's attention during analysis was that this statue had a representation, had 5 legs instead of the traditional 4. And so it's that right front leg that there are 2 different versions of, because you saw the statue differently depending on where you were standing in relation to the statue. That if you were in front, you could see the 2 front legs that are straight down. But if you were on the side, sort of behind the head, that first representation of the right front leg was blocked. And so they gave you a second representation of that right front leg in stride. And I thought that was a really interesting detail. I found a couple of other examples of that same type of representation that was clearly the way things were done in a particular civilization at a particular time in history. And so I wanted to use my image coding to emphasize that particular observation about this particular piece of art, to code my image in a way to emphasize that. And that worked really nicely, but I also found that the shapes that were available were a little bit restricting. And so with Transana 5.0, I've added a shape called Polygon, which allows essentially freehand drawing. And so with the Polygon shape, you can do a more detailed outline of the part of the drawing that you want to emphasize. And so this is essentially the same coding, but I've done it in a more detailed way to show the legs in a little bit clearer form to really emphasize exactly the bit of the drawing that I was referring to. And it takes a little bit more work to draw that. So what I'm going to do is just pull up an uncoded version of this and just show you real quick how that works. So we can create, I'm going to select a code for, let's do the old version of the good leg. I'm going to go ahead and code this image. And so the way Transana 4 would work is that you were allowed the rectangle shape and you drew the rectangle and kind of fit it as best you could. Whereas so I'm going to go ahead and hide that, and I'm now going to choose the new version, which uses the polygon shape. That's the new coding shape that I've added to Transana, and that allows you to go into greater detail. So I can actually, what you do is you draw a set of anchor points, and Transana draws lines to connect them. So I'm going to go ahead and click, 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 and then those have all been left clicks. My final click is going to be a right click to signal to the drawing program that I'm done. And so when I right click, it then draws around the set of clicks that I have done. So let me do that one more time. So I can left click, left click, left click, left click, 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 and then right click to finish it. So you can see how there was there were lines that were showing me where my drawing was going and what it was looking like. And it's just a series of clicks to trace the outline of the shape. And then when you do that final click, which is a right click instead of a left click, Transana completes the drawing and allows you to create a very detailed shape instead of the less specific rectangular or ellipse shapes that you had before. And so this ability to do a more careful coding, a more detailed coding of images, it allows you to be more selective in how you want to do that coding. And of course, when you're doing image coding, let's go ahead and zoom in on this picture. I'm in my PDF now. And if I want to do some image coding here, I can code image. I can select, again, I didn't create a keyword for it. I'm not going to take the time to do that. So I'm going to just select my polygon keyword that I intended to demonstrate selecting polygons. And so I can now, in a PDF, do that tracing of the outlines. To make my selection, let's go ahead and make mine with a little thicker there. And so I can make my polygon shape, my more detailed shape on PDFs as well. And so I'll now save my PDF snapshot as and so I'm able to do that greater level of detail in the coding. So it's a new coding shape available for images, and that can be used either on still images, still image snapshots, or on PDF selections and PDF snapshots. And so that is the third feature I wanted to talk about. The fourth feature that I just want to mention real briefly is not something that's visual. It's not something really flashy. But over the years, I've gotten the question fairly many times, how do I export my transcripts from Transana? And the old way was to load the transcript and to choose file, save document as, and you exported your transcript that way. And that worked fine for many, many years. But then people started to not have access to their media files anymore, for example. And you notice that when you load the transcript, you had to have the media file there to do it. And so you can now right-click a transcript and choose Export Transcript. And when you choose that, I mean, I've just done it. I've exported the transcript. So what Transana has done is created a transcript. It's put it in the same location that the media file that it's associated with is. It's named it the same name as that media file. It's put it into Word docx format because that's the most common text format that people want, and that's probably what was most useful. And so you can export a transcript that easily. I have two transcripts here. If I wanted to export them both, I could choose Export Transcripts off the episode. If I wanted to do everything in the library, I can choose Export Transcripts and get a whole library's worth of transcript exported. Or if I go up to the library root, I can actually do Export Transcripts, and Transana will export all of the transcripts that I have in this entire database. So you can very, very quickly create a whole bunch of transcripts, essentially as a way of backing up all of the transcription that you've done by exporting it out to Word docs placed with all of your media files. So that's one of those. It's not incredibly flashy. It's not very visual, but from a data maintenance standpoint, that's a really nice feature because it makes it very, very easy to take all of the work that you put into creating your transcripts, put it out onto your hard drive in a disk format, in a file format that's there visible on your disk, instead of it being in Transana's database where it's a little harder to see and a little harder to get at, particularly if there's some kind of data disaster and you need to recover years worth of work. It's really nice to have those docx files out there with their media files that can be in your backup, and you can recover all of that work very, very quickly. So while it's not terribly flashy, is something that I still consider a significant feature of this release. So at this point, those are the things that I wanted to point out about the Transana 5.0 release. I hope that I've given you a sense of what they look like, enough of a sense of how they work, that you can go on and experiment with them on your own. I am creating a new version of the tutorial for Transana 5.0. Let me just go straight to the, if you go to the Transana tutorial, you'll now notice at the bottom that you've got the 4.0 tutorial, which is the traditional linear version of the tutorial that I hope you're all familiar with. But there's now the Transana 5.0 tutorial, which is under construction. It's going to take me a couple of months, I think, to update everything I want to update. But I've got the most important features available in that. So if you go into the new tutorial, it presents you with a series of sections with lots of links in them. And that's how you get to all of the tutorial pages. So it's not linear the way the old tutorial was, the old tutorial, you went from one page to the next page to the next page. You couldn't just jump around if you had a particular question or need. This allows you a more free-form access, a more random access to the different parts. But you'll see things like importing a PDF. So I can click on that, and there is, in fact, a nice little video there that demonstrates importing a PDF. Under the transcription section, there's automated transcription using Speechmatics that demonstrates how to get those transcripts with Speechmatics that I was showing. Under making selections, there's a making selections section. If you go to PDF data, there's a video on creating quick quotes from PDFs, quick snapshots from PDFs, standard quotes from PDFs, standard snapshots from PDFs. So 4 separate videos to show you ways of coding PDFs with different approaches or analytic advantages to those. So the new tutorial, while many of the pages in it are starting to show their age a little bit and need to be updated, I've at least put it out there with the new content that you need to access the new features of Transana 5. You won't find a video there yet about doing the polygon shapes because I haven't had a chance to write and produce that one yet, but it's on my list of things that will be done relatively soon. So the new tutorial is one of the tools out there available for you to learn to use these new features. So with that being said, I'm going to open the floor up for questions. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate your being here. And if you've got questions, I'm happy to hang around for a little while and answer questions, whether it's about new features or old features, whatever you want to ask about. And if you don't have questions, then thanks very much for coming. And please get in touch with me if questions do come up later, or if there's anything I can do to help you make better use of Transana. So, questions?
David, can you hear me? This is Numa Marquis.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. When you are demonstrating the Polygon tool, it seems to me that this is a really nice way. So, for example, when you are selecting the woman's face, yeah, exactly. So you did this quite quickly. Obviously, you can do this much more carefully. But I think that this could be used in conjunction with photographic post-processing software. I happen to be a photographer, so I'm interested in that kind of stuff. But so whether you use, let's say, an Adobe product like Lightroom and/or Photoshop or other alternatives, you can actually get really, really precise selections to the point where you can see, the individual hairs and all that kind of stuff. So I wonder if you could comment on how, it seems to me that you could use this as, a first roughing out tool and then go into these other programs to get, really, really good selections. This is as much I guess an aesthetic thing as much as anything else, but I like to do Chuck Goodwin type transcripts. So can you comment on that idea?
My experience of photo editing tools, which is quite limited compared to yours, I'm sure, is that they already have relatively good ways of automatically selecting shapes. That they have, magic lassos where you draw a circle and it will narrow down to looking at, I guess, the contrast of the colors to pick out particular objects.
Right.
And so I think that those tools really have much more sophisticated ways of pursuing that, where they're actually looking at the image and looking and making decisions about how one decides what's included or excluded in a particular shape. And Transana doesn't try and do anything like that. This is really just
No, of course not.
a very crude outline overlay. I will say that you can, for example, if you've made your selections, you can export this with a selection. There's a state of the visible selection, which takes whatever's in your window and sends that to a JPEG file, or there's save whole image, which takes the whole image with whatever coding shapes you've drawn on it and saves that as a JPEG. Pro tip, if you are showing the coding key, if the coding key is visible, then that actually gets included as part of the export. It just gets appended to the bottom of the drawings to give you the keywords associated with each of the shapes to help make that exported artifact something a little bit more analytically useful about that. But my goal was to create something specifically for the analysis of data, and I was much more concerned with how one kind of represents a portion of the graphic and attaches a label to it and communicates that label with others. And I don't think that requires the same level of precision as what you're talking about. And
no, not at all.
And I think that there are the tools that do provide that level of precision absolutely exist out there and are fantastic at that. And I think Transana is really trying to do something a little bit different.
No, I understand what you're saying. You know, this was not intended as a criticism of the level of detail, but it seems to me that the fact that you can get a quick and dirty selection tool, and then, as you say, export it directly as a JPEG, and then if you're really into post-processing, etc., then this is a very good way of really speeding things up. So I really like what you've done here.
I think another use for that is that an editor, for example, might take a whole selection of photographs, run through them, make markings on them about what the particular details are that they want attended to, and then pass that data on to a photo editor or somebody with that greater expert to then do the actual photo processing. So I think that this can be a quick and dirty way of doing the thinking and to represent those ideas as a way of communicating to others who could then use the more detailed tools to do the final product.
I very much agree with you. This is just a long-term suggestion for you. So at the moment, you've only got the option of saving to JPEG. You might want to think about saving to other formats such as RAW, R-A-W, which gives you much more control over what you can do with that. But I mean, the JPEG is just fine. The RAW gives you more. The RAW format, the .RAW format, gives you more editing possibilities, if you like.
Right. And it would be very simple to add additional export formats for whatever the programming language I'm using supports naturally. I don't know what their level of support for RAW is.
Okay. It's just a thought,
it's a good thought. And that's one of the things that I'm constantly struggling with is I recognize that Transana has a tendency towards complexity, that there are ways that it does things in a more complex way than most people need to most of the time. The ability to support 5 transcripts on 4 videos all working simultaneously is probably more than most people need most of the time.
Can I put in a bid for 6 or 7 different video channels that you can display simultaneously, because I've got data like that, classroom data, which, but anyway, you're right. I mean, 4 is plenty for most people.
Well, when I developed it, that's what the computers of the day could handle.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
So yeah, it would probably be relatively easy to add to increase that number. Just that I haven't really heard much of a demand for that.
Okay.
And I'm constantly trying to find a balance between giving people the features that they need and will use, and showing a little bit of complexity to entice people into doing things in a more complex way. You know, the sort of I didn't know that was even possible school of things, but also I need to keep things simple enough that that people who are less comfortable with computers can still manage them. And so that's the balance I'm trying to choose. And so choosing not to even deal with the issue of export formats for graphics was one of those ease of use choices that I made that I could relatively easily change if there was a strong outcry in the Transana community for it.
Okay, well, you have a customer of one.
I appreciate your vote, and I absolutely do listen carefully to what the feedback that I get from users.
Okay, thank you.
David, thank you for this introduction. I don't have any questions at the time. Thanks very much, and I will get back to you later on by email.
Yeah, I think for your particular work, the export transcript feature might be the most useful bit of all of this for you.
Yeah, we will see. I have to think about certain things, and I will come back to you about this.
I look forward to it.
And thanks for all the work you do.
Oh, you're quite welcome. All right, if there aren't other questions, we can go ahead and wrap up for the day. Again, thank you very much for coming. I hope that you found this interesting and useful. And as questions come up, you can always go to the Transana website and use the contact form to get in touch with me. That is the most efficient way of getting a hold of me with questions about Transana, partly because the contact form asks you a couple of questions about which version of Transana you're using that I find to be more relevant to how I answer a question than people might expect. So by all means, get in touch with me as questions come up in the future.
Well, thank you, David. It was really very interesting presentation. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. All right. Have a good day.
Bye.